Good evening and welcome. Tonight, the world has completely changed. The United States launched Operation Midnight Hammer, a full-spectrum precision bombing strike on Iran's three most vital nuclear facilities, Fordow, Natanz and Isfahan. Carried out by stealthy B-2 Spirit bombers, this is one of the most audacious and far-reaching US air missions in decades, both in intent and in execution. At NDTV, we can now confirm that we reported early this morning that the B-2 Spirits seen flying westward, in fact being announced as having flown westward over the Pacific, were a calculated diversion by the Trump government, a textbook deception. The flight paths and timing simply didn't add up with the moment of impact over the Iranian skies at midnight last night. Our analysis here on NDTV showed that the real strike group of B-2 stealth bombers was already in the air en route eastward from the United States, cloaked in secrecy and supported by a long-prepared aerial tanker bridge. They were refueling all along the way in an epic long-distance journey. The real B-2 bombers flew in, struck hard, and vanished just as they were designed to do. But there's a deeper and more dangerous geopolitical layer, and I'm going to expose it to you tonight. It is now increasingly clear that Pakistan played a role not directly in the strike, but in enabling it. Just days before the operation, Pakistan's Army Chief General Asim Munir praised Donald Trump, remember, and floated the idea of a Nobel Peace Prize for him. An astonishing move now viewed by many as a signal of alignment or appeasement. And for a country with no self-respect, that country has condemned the United States for the attack on Iran just 3 days after recommending Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize. But that's a side story because Pakistan is honestly not that important, though we must admit it is today because it allowed its airspace to be used for this bombing, and maybe that was the Pakistan-Trump quid pro quo. Sources suggest the US required overflight access or airspace coordination through Pakistan-controlled corridors, and that Pakistan quietly complied, a move that will have enormous regional and global repercussions. Operation Midnight Hammer isn't just an airstrike, it's a thunderclap that will echo through history, and I'm going to tell you why and how. The US has done what was once considered unthinkable: strike in mainland Iran. That country's nuclear ambitions lie buried under craters, and I've got pictures to show that to you as well. Pakistan's quiet cooperation raises new questions, and America's B-2 bombers, invisible, unstoppable, in the winter of their life, conducting their most dangerous mission, have changed the rules of the global game. Tonight I describe in minute detail, my friends, how this strike happened and why it could be the beginning of something far bigger. US B-2 bombers, as you know, struck three of Iran's top nuclear facilities: the Fordow facility, the Isfahan facility, and the Natanz facility. Fordow is by far the premier nuclear establishment in Iran, and that is the one that was struck. I want to show you pictures of what that facility looks like before it was actually bombed. These are routine pictures from the 19th of June, just 3 days before the US bombing. Now take a look at what it looked like today after bombs were dropped on it. You've got the holes, which are the entry points of the GBU-57 penetrator bombs that were dropped from B-2 stealth bombers. Ominous signs of the kind of destruction that has obviously been wrought way below. These are entry points of some of the most destructive weapons ever created, non-nuclear weapons ever created, and these are those entry points. The actual destruction is about 70 meters deep, and I'm going to show you in detail what kind of damage these bombs would have done, but these holes are a telltale sign that America hit Iran precisely where it hurt. And before we proceed further, I wanted to quickly show you the 10 defining images that I've handpicked for what manifests this historic airstrike. The first, as the US entered into this war with Iran with these airstrikes, these images from the Situation Room showing US President Trump in a cap with his senior advisors and secretaries. This was at a time when the bombing was actually taking place. You can see Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth and others, all with Trump, including the Vice President, watching, presumably, the attack actually take place. Well, rescue teams at the spot in Tel Aviv, the capital of Israel, in the aftermath of the Iranian response to the US airstrikes, where residential buildings have been damaged perhaps more than ever before. NDTV has been reporting right there from the ground. These are some of those images in our second defining image. Tel Aviv, Haifa, Jerusalem and other cities in Israel have come under retaliatory attack from Iran. Multiple Israeli cities are continuing to be struck even as we speak. Missiles fired in multiple batches. Sirens have been sounding across Israel as well. So the initial retaliation from Iran for the US airstrike is pointed directly at Israel. And we've got images courtesy Press TV, which is the state-owned broadcaster in Iran, which has launched multi-warhead missiles like the Khyber Shekhan ballistic missile and the Khorashan 4 missile, which is supposed to be one of the most advanced missiles of Iran as part of the 20th wave of Operation True Promise 3. True Promise 3 is the code name of Iran's strikes against Israel at this time. Meanwhile, never forget, in this defining image, India's Operation Sindhu, the mass evacuation of Indians from Iran continues. They've been evacuated in multiple batches. Most recently, 280 persons landed at the Delhi airport a short while ago. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has thanked the US President in a nationally televised arrest early this morning. He said this strike will change history and that the US has truly surpassed itself by bombing Iran's 3 principal nuclear sites. Well, the US's deadliest weapons against Iran have been brought to bear in Operation Midnight Hammer, whether it is the GBU-57 or Tomahawk cruise missiles fired from US nuclear attack submarines. All of those weapons saw action in this particular mission. Another big defining image that just come in, Israel's attack on Iran's Bushehr International Airport. You can see smoke rising in the distance. Very clearly a missile landing on that particular target. NDTV's Ankit Tyagi in the most damaged missile-hit parts of Israel's capital of Tel Aviv. He's reported from places where missiles had landed as part of Iran's wave of retaliations just shortly after Operation Midnight Hammer.
On the other side, also some buildings which have sustained damage, some cars which have also been damaged.
Another image that went viral, become a defining image of coverage from Israel, was this one from Jerusalem of a Sky News reporter who was live right in the middle of a missile interception.
Sirens will probably sound in this area quite soon. Oh, there's a in coast. Another one as well. Oh, I can see quite a few there now. 1, 2, 3.
And here's another defining image of the Israeli Defense Forces that have put out these thermal camera images from the air depicting the destruction of military targets within Iran. There appear to be ballistic missiles, aircraft, launchers and trucks loaded with possible ammunition that have been struck. We are told that these are strikes that happened today in the wake of Operation Midnight Hammer. Well, Iran has hit Israeli sites continuously today. The Israeli leadership has visited the damaged sites. Iranian missile strikes in Tel Aviv continue to be one of the big defining images. So I've told you about the B-2 Spirit stealth bombers that led the strikes against those nuclear facilities in Iran as part of America's Operation Midnight Hammer. But the B-2s were actually just one of at least 6 different weapons and weapons platforms that we know for a fact had a part to play in this audacious mission. So I've told you about the B-2 Spirits. 6 of these aircraft conducted those strikes. The Americans have about 19 of these aircraft. There were originally 21. 2 have crashed over the years. There are 19 left. 6 of them were part of these strikes. And by the way, each of these aircraft costs about $2 billion. So chew on that for a moment. In addition to the B-2 Spirits, there were Los Angeles-class and Virginia-class nuclear-powered attack submarines that were deployed, prowling somewhere in the North Arabian Sea, we are told, and they were also there. An unspecified number of these submarines were there, and I'll tell you in a moment what they fired. First, the B-2 Spirits are said to have dropped at least a dozen GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators. These are some of the most powerful non-nuclear weapons ever built. They're about 20 feet long. Each of these were dropped from one of those B-2 Spirit bombers. They're called bunker busters, and I'll be showing you in a moment what they actually did. At least 30 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles. These are slow-moving cruise missiles that were fired from those submarines I just told you about. And they conducted a huge amount of damage on the surface of those nuclear facilities. In addition to the B-2 Spirit aircraft that were in the air, there were at least 2 stealth fighter types that were also providing air superiority in the form of F-22 Raptor fighters. This is considered the Rolls-Royce of stealth superiority. And of course, the F-35, which is America's newest stealth fighter. Those were also said to be in the air and providing air support to the B-2s, which didn't really need it because they're practically invisible to radar, but so are these, and they were in the air as well. President Trump did speak shortly after Operation Midnight Hammer. Here's what he said.
The U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
180 seconds of hell is how we're describing the mission from the time the bomb left those B-2 Spirit stealth bombers to the time they detonated deep inside Iran's nuclear facilities like Fordow. Let me just describe what those 180 seconds must have looked like. At the 0 mark, the B-2 releases the GBU-57 from 40,000 feet near the Qom region near Fordow. At 10 seconds after launch, the bomb begins a high-speed drop with GPS and inertial guidance. 25 seconds after launch, it attains supersonic velocity, piercing the atmospheric drag at that point. 40 seconds after launch, the bomb impacts the mountain above the Fordow site. 41 seconds, penetration initiates through hundreds of feet of rock and concrete. 44 seconds after launch, the warhead detonates inside Fordow's underground complex. A whole minute after launch, 60 seconds, a massive shockwave collapses the enrichment chambers and shafts. 90 seconds, a minute and a half after that, seismic indicators and sensors detect detonation across the region. 2 minutes after launch, satellite and drone feeds confirm structural damage. That's a total of 180 seconds, after which you've got the B-2 Spirits leaving the site and getting away from any possible detection from the ground.
I mean, we obviously saw this coming. Israel had completely dominated Iran when it comes to their capacity to defend themselves, but they could not get to the depth in these facilities to really do damage to the nuclear program. That required a specific type of munition, a massive ordnance penetrator, specifically the GBU-57. And only the United States had that and the capacity to deliver it, which was done by the B-2 Spirit aircraft. But I'm sure the U.S. intelligence community is working hard to determine just how much damage they did. But I think the estimation would be they would set these programs back many years, 3 to 5 years, and that's what they're looking at now. Of course, now we're looking at what Iran's going to do in response.
And the other weapon, apart from the GBU-57 bunker buster penetrator bombs that we just told you about, are Tomahawk cruise missiles, and their use in Operation Midnight Hammer was first reported here on NDTV. So let's just show you how that would have played out. At the 0-second mark, Tomahawk cruise missiles, which are basically long-range land attack cruise missiles, would have been launched from Los Angeles or Virginia-class submarines somewhere in the northern Arabian Sea. At the 5-second mark, the missiles would have cleared their launch tubes and ignited their booster engines. Remember, cruise missiles are very much like aircraft. 15 seconds after launch, the missiles would have broken the water surface. Remember, they're being fired from underwater by submarines, so they would be swimming to the surface, breaking the surface, and then beginning their low-altitude cruise. At the 1-minute mark, the missiles would level out at terrain-hugging altitude. Like I said, remember, they're cruise missiles, not ballistic missiles. They fly flat along the curvature of the Earth, just like aircraft. At the 300-second after launch mark, guidance systems would have activated. Mid-flight corrections would happen because these are guided weapons, remember. At the 900-second mark, these Tomahawk missiles would have entered and penetrated Iranian airspace. The missiles would be guided to fly well below existing radar coverage, even though we do know that Iran's air defenses have been severely compromised already. At about the 1200-second mark after launch, the missiles would have split course to target the 3 different targets at those nuclear sites of Isfahan, Natanz, and Fordow. At the 1500-second mark, the final target acquisition via the onboard sensors on board those Tomahawk missiles would have taken place. At about 30 seconds later, the missiles would do their job and strike the targets with precision. Remember, Tomahawks were first used way back during the Gulf War in 1990-91, and they have been upgraded and improved to devastating effect. 1600 seconds after launch, secondary explosions would be detected in the nuclear infrastructure. 1800 seconds after launch, that's 30 minutes. These are slow-moving weapons, unlike much faster supersonic cruise missiles like the BrahMos. This one would take a good 30 minutes to get the job done. Satellites would pick up fires, structural collapse, and signal disruptions as well. Vishnu Shom is live with me. He, in fact, broke the idea that Tomahawk cruise missiles were also used. Vishnu, this is an interesting one. Launched from submarines, used in their land attack mode to attack possibly surface features at some of those nuclear sites. What more can you tell us?
Well, Shiv, let me pose a question to you. The Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles, more than 24 of them, were fired from a submarine, right? They were fired before the B-2s struck their target. But can you tell me what hit their targets last in this entire US package? The answer is the same Tomahawk cruise missiles. They were the first to be fired. They're subsonic missiles. They were fired at approximately the same time that the B-2 stealth fighter bombers went in and hit their targets using bombs and exited Iranian airspace. And once they were in the process of doing that, these 24 approximately land attack cruise missiles, the Tomahawks, hammered Isfahan and Natanz as well, by which time the aerial units were actually away from the target. Now, these were primarily used not in Fordow, where the penetrator warheads, the GBU-57s, were used. These were primarily used in Natanz and certainly in Isfahan as well. America fights its wars very heavily reliant on the Tomahawk cruise missiles. These were used with great effect, we are told. Satellite imagery, when it does emerge, of Natanz and Isfahan is likely to reveal that.
Vishnu's news break on the Tomahawks picked up by everyone else, including international media. And let's just show you now what those Tomahawk cruise missiles and the GBU-57 massive penetrator bunker busters actually hit. Those are 3 big nuclear facilities, but I want to make sense of them for you because they are very, very important. So Natanz is one of the most prized facilities. It is the main atomic site and an enrichment facility, part of a facility that is underground to defend against airstrikes, where Iran had been enriching uranium to a purity of about 60%. The Fordow enrichment facility is, as you've obviously heard by now, the most protected, most fortified nuclear site in Iran. Is located on an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps base, a former base, of course. The focus of Western concerns over Iran's nuclear program and its possible breakout capability is centered in Fordow. So you're going to be hearing that name quite often going forward. And finally, Isfahan is the third nuclear facility. It is the largest nuclear research complex in Iran, houses uranium conversion facilities and a nuclear fuel fabrication plant. So Natanz, Fordow and Isfahan, not very far apart, but in the heart of Iran. And this map really gives you a sense of how deep into Iranian airspace those B-2s had to fly in order to actually strike their targets. Because remember, the missiles, the bombs that were dropped, the GBU-57 bombs that were dropped, are not powered bombs, so they don't have a standoff range. They pretty much just fall straight to the ground with gravity, and therefore those B-2s had to be directly over those targets, so they had to be deep inside Iran for their job. And here's a ground report, one of the rare reports that have emerged from Iran, not very far from Fordow, that we've received.
Well, the U.S. has attacked 3 Iranian nuclear sites, namely Fordow, Natanz and Isfahan, escalating the Iran-Israel conflict and risking a wider regional war. U.S. President Donald Trump called the strikes very successful, with all U.S. aircraft safely exiting Iranian airspace after delivering what he called a full payload of bombs, including bunker busters capable of penetrating fortified underground facilities. Well, this action follows more than a week of Israeli airstrikes targeting Iranian nuclear and military sites. Iranian officials report damage but say many facilities were evacuated beforehand. Well, the conflict has caused severe humanitarian consequences, with hundreds of Iranian civilians killed and thousands injured due to Israeli strikes on residential buildings and civilian infrastructure, including hospitals. Amnesty International and the United Nations experts have expressed grave concern over the rising civilian toll. Well, the targeted sites are managed by Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, which insists its nuclear program is only for peaceful and civilian purposes. And the organization condemned the attacks as violations of Iran's sovereignty. Iranian officials have warned that further escalation could have dangerous consequences and urged retaliatory attacks. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has also called on U.S. involvement very, very dangerous for everybody. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has vowed to continue military operations against what he calls a threat from Iran's nuclear program. Well, the U.S. strikes were coordinated with Israel, highlighting their close alliance. Meanwhile, senior advisor to the Iranian parliament speaker said that as Iranians had been expecting such attacks to take place by the United States, the site had been evacuated and the materials had been removed prior to the attacks. Let's take a listen.
From Iran's perspective, nothing too strange has happened. Iran has been waiting for an attack on Fordow for several nights. The site has long been evacuated and has not suffered any irreversible damage in the attack. 2 things are certain. First, science cannot be bombed, and second, the gambler will lose this time.
Well, in the wake of the United States' recent airstrikes on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has issued a strong statement condemning the attacks. Araghchi has declared that the U.S., as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, has committed a grave violation of the United Nations Charter, international law, and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty by targeting Iran's peaceful nuclear installations. He described the strikes as outrageous and warned that they will have everlasting consequences for the region and beyond. Iran's foreign minister has said that in accordance with the United Nations Charter's provisions allowing for legitimate self-defense, Iran reserves all options to defend its sovereignty, interest, and people. Actually, he signaled Tehran's readiness to respond to protect its national security and territorial integrity.
Now remember, after Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran conducted missile strikes on Israel where there was a great deal of damage. Israel struck back and released this video, this thermal camera aerial video depicting damage on the Iranian side. It shows a huge amount of damage to trucks, to missile launchers. Also, one particular aircraft is seen in that video. And on the other side, you see Iran's most advanced ballistic missile called the Khorasan-4 being launched apparently towards Israel. Now that there is no confirmation on whether that missile was actually launched, but that's what the Iran state mouthpiece has been saying. Remember, there has been speculation over whether Iran is running out of ballistic missiles, having sent wave after wave already into Israel. There has been talk of Israel running out of weaponry, including air defense weaponry as well. But today, both sides demonstrated that they are still weaponized, still well armed, and are able to conduct strikes on each other's territory. Now I want to come to a simulation of what it would look like if Operation Midnight Hammer were to spiral completely out of control and lead to a possible global war. You're hearing a lot of talk of whether this could be World War III. Now, we're not going to say World War III, but we will say this. Given the pattern of way things are, given how things are structured at this point of time, it is possible that small missteps and overreactions can lead to a cascading chain reaction leading to a worst-case scenario. Let's show you how that could be possible. Once again, this is a theoretical simulation of what we think could possibly happen at one hypothetical scenario. Step number one is what we already know. The US has bombed Iran's Fordow, Natanz, and the Isfahan nuclear sites. The B-2 stealth bombers and submarine-launched Tomahawk cruise missiles have been used. This is what we already know. That is step one. Step two, this is step two in the escalation. Iran responds with missile strikes, not just against Israel, which we know has already happened, but also US bases are hit in Iraq, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates. Step three in this simulation escalation, Israel goes on a full war footing, conducts airstrikes on the Iranian IRGC targets in Syria and in Lebanon. Again, something that has happened before, but this time it takes a new context. In the escalatory simulation, step number 4 now, Hezbollah and Iraq Shia militias, which are obviously favorable to Iran, funded by Iran, launch huge rocket salvos against Israel. They're launched at Israeli cities as well as at US embassies, seen as a big escalation. Step number 5 in this simulated escalation, the US Navy gets involved. It engages Iranian fast attack boats engaged in the Strait of Hormuz. Oil prices completely explode. And as we speak, in fact, there is news coming in that the Israeli leadership and parliament has announced the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And that is something that is part of the simulation, but also happening in real life. Just a reminder. Now let's go on to step number 6 of the simulated escalation. Iran threatens to close the Hormuz Strait completely, which we know in real life has already happened. And therefore, Saudi Arabia's oil infrastructure stands to be targeted by Israel, because where are they going to send that oil out from? Step number 7 in this escalation, Russia steps into the room, condemns the US airstrike as illegal, and it moves, very importantly, it moves missile defense assets into Syria, Iran at Iran's invitation. This is seen as a huge escalation, obviously, by the United States. But meanwhile, in step 8 of this simulation, China warns the United States against further aggression, and it begins military exercises in the Gulf of Oman and deploys its warships there. Now, again, the Chinese already have warships in this area, so does the Indian Navy. This is an area where patrolling happens quite often, so this is very, very realistic. Step number 9 in this scenario of a simulated escalation, Israel strikes deep into Iran's ballistic missile sites once again. Iran retaliates with hundreds of missiles across the region, replenished by Russia by this time. Step number 10 in this escalation matrix that we've simulated, the United States and the United Kingdom announce a naval blockade of all Iranian ports. Cyber attacks begin on Iran's grid and military network. So a 360-degree attack begins from the US, UK, and parts of the Western world on Iran. This is the halfway mark to that worst-case scenario that we're talking about. Wait with me as we now get into step number 11 of this simulated escalation, where Iran, not to sit pretty, launches ballistic missiles at something called the Dimona Nuclear Center in Israel, which is a nuclear research facility in Israel, causing partial damage at this particular center in central Israel. The response to this is that step number 12 involves something away from Israel, where Russia provides S-400 cover to Iranian strategic sites. S-400 is familiar to us here in India. That is one of the world's most formidable air defense systems. Russian air assets are also deployed to protect Iran because now having struck an Israeli nuclear facility, a response is definitely likely. And that's why in step number 13 of this escalation simulation, China starts to ship high-tech drones and strike systems to Iran in order to bolster its defensives and offensive systems. It also gets Iran to sign an emergency strategic defense accord with Tehran, the ever opportunistic China signing accords at a time of deep conflict. Step 14 of this escalation, we're getting to the end. Wait with me, bear with me. North Korea, which has been sitting this one out so far, in this simulated escalation, fires a ballistic missile into the Sea of Japan, showing solidarity with the Iranian BRICS axis. Do you see what I mean? There are many geopolitical threads that could play out. Step number 15, the US deploys nuclear submarines to the Eastern Arabian Sea. We already know that they are in the Northern Arabian Sea as well. Military readiness state is raised to DEFCON 2, which basically means ready for usage of nuclear weapons. The unthinkable is now looming. Step 16, Israel prepares for doctrinal Samson option, which is a nuclear option, even though it doesn't have nuclear weapons. This is an option under the threat of a multi-front missile attack, possibly a dirty bomb in Tel Aviv as well. Finally, step number 17, India and Pakistan, which have had nothing to do with this escalation so far, are drawn into escalating positions because of Iranian-backed elements operating near their borders. Remember, Pakistan has a 900-kilometer border with Iran. Iran and India have close diplomatic relations. The president of Iran dialed Prime Minister Modi today as well. Escalating tensions begin there. Step number 18, only 3 steps left till the unthinkable. Russia and NATO forces clash in an aerial skirmish over the Black Sea. It's already happening during the Russia-Ukraine war. This is during an Iran convoy escort. So things turn very ugly over the Black Sea. Step 19, the second last step. Global markets completely melt down. They crash. The UN Security Council is ripped apart after Russia and China walk out and issue direct nuclear warnings. And then finally, viewer, step 20, the unthinkable. Wish we didn't even have to say it in a simulation, but the US hypothetically at this point would detect strategic launches, nuclear missile launches from Russia and China following a failed Israeli nuclear strike on Iran. Global nuclear war would then begin. And thankfully, a hypothetical simulation is only an academic exercise at this point of time. There are real concerns and worries in the real world that NDTV is tracking. India had already launched Operation Sindhu, meanwhile, to evacuate its nationals from Iran. More than 800 Indian nationals, including over 300 students, have so far been brought back on 3 charter flights, 2 from Iran's Mashhad and 1 from Turkmenistan's Ashgabat. My colleague Tanushka spoke to one of the parents of a returning student in Delhi today.
We have with us, someone who's come back from Iran. Sir, of course, massive anxieties with respect to this journey. Tell us what went through your mind today when you got onto that flight.
Actually, last 10 days we were in the war zone. We were facing nightmares every day in and out. Things were getting very, very bad every day with drones attacking, with missiles attacking. We were asked to move to Tehran, then move to Qom, then move to Mashhad. So government of India supported big time. They had all the diplomatic channels open. They discussed with all the counterparts, whether it's Iran or Pakistan or Afghanistan, to basically open their space. And finally, they started their operations of evacuating day before yesterday. From my group, there were 100 people, 20 people were evacuated yesterday, and today 73 people evacuated. Only 3 people left. So back home, people were very anxious about, but in last 2 days, the kind of a support what we have got, and immediately the way the government of India kicked in and helped us, I think the people back home were very, very,
Tell us what is it that you have seen? What is it, what are the, how has it been like in Iran? You've come back from such a war zone.
So there were drones and missiles flying over our head, no communication channels, the internet was down, the lines were down, the international roaming was down, so we were completely cut off from the rest of the world. We were having problems on the shortage of the food supplies as well because many of the workers who were supplying food, they ran away. So problems were there, but somehow with the support of Government of India, we were never left behind. So I'm very thankful to the Government of India for the support they have given to us.
Israel's ambassador to India, Ambassador Reuven Azar, gave me his first interview following Operation Midnight Hammer, where he spoke not just about the possibility of more strikes against Iran, but also about the safety of Indian nationals there. Here's that exclusive chat. And joining us live now on NDTV, first and exclusive as part of our rolling coverage, is the Israeli ambassador to India, Ambassador Reuven Azar. Good morning, Ambassador. Thanks for being here on NDTV. My first question to you is, we've just heard and been reporting that Iranian missiles have hit different parts of Israel. There's a high alert across Israel at this point of time. The first retaliatory response from Iran after the US bombing earlier today. Your first words on that?
Well, Israel is indeed attacked. We had a barrage of more than 25 ballistic missiles. Israelis are in shelters. We are hearing reports about several hits, despite the fact that the most missiles have been foiled. There happens to be some injured people, so we are bracing and we are basically ready for this attack. It was expected. Israelis were directed to stay in shelters. We knew that this attack may come, and the government will have to decide what to do about it, how to retaliate and when to retaliate.
Ambassador, how do you see this situation unfolding? I'd like to first ask you about the United States bombing of those nuclear sites in Iran. We've heard from your Prime Minister in Israel as well. Your reading, your understanding of these strikes by the United States?
I think that the leadership of the President Trump has proven to be amazing. The President of the United States took an historic and bold move. The decision to attack the nuclear facilities, I think, is the right decision. It is a decision that not only defends Israel, it defends the region, it defends the world, and it saves us from nuclear catastrophe that was planned by this malign regime. So it started with an Israeli strike against those installations and against the second existential threat that was the ballistic missile threat. As a result of that, the barrages of missiles from Iran have decreased substantially. But now this American action is basically sending a message to Iran that if they continue with their aggression, the price for the regime will be huge. And it remains to see whether the Iranians decide to retaliate against the American targets. I hope they don't. I think that it's very important to keep this conflict as narrow as possible. I think the Iranians now should come back to the table, should negotiate the dismantling of their military nuclear program and the dismantling of their missile ballistic program.
Ambassador Azar, my third question to you is, the Iranian government leadership has put the United States on notice. They've said no U.S. city, no U.S. citizen is safe. How do you interpret that threat? There are a large number of U.S. bases and military units spread across West Asia. Do you think Iranian attack on some of those facilities is a possibility as well now?
Well, thankfully, Shiv, Israel has decimated and degraded substantially the Iranian capability to retaliate because their stockpile of ballistic missiles has dwindled because of the fact that we have taken all their air defenses and their capability to continue their aggression against the region has diminished. If you take into account that there is a huge American amassing of force in the region, I think it would be absolutely irresponsible, not only for the region, but also for Iran's and the Iranian people's interest, if the Iranians continue this aggression.